Welcome to the Think Big Series for 2021, brought to you by PSG. My name is Dan Hugo, and I'm the Chief Executive for PSG Consult Distribution. Now, PSG is a leading financial services group with an extensive network of offices throughout South Africa, as well as a presence in Namibia. We've been in operation since August of 1998, and we pride ourselves in providing, a bigger picture approach to our clients, the advice we provide to our clients, which ranges from asset management, wealth management, and short-term insurance. We offer our clients access to a wide range of products, both proprietary as well as those supplied by third-party product providers. This covers comprehensive advice, or where necessary, or where clients require focused advice backed up by the necessary products and services. The Think Big series is a collection of dialogues with leading speakers hosted by the award-winning financial journalist, Bruce Whitfield. We aim to provide our clients an audience with independent insights to help them formulate their own opinions about some of our country's most pressing and leading issues. The uncertainty and challenges continue to abound, but we believe that armed with the necessary knowledge, we are all better equipped to chart our way forward. So in today's talk, the speaker is Justice Malala. Justice is well known to us. He's a political commentator, newspaper columnist, and author of South Africa, of a #1 bestseller in South Africa. We have now begun our descent. Now, Justice writes regularly for columns in the Times, online, the Financial Mail magazine in South Africa. And until August of 2018, Justice was a resident political analyst for the news channel ENCA. He also presented a weekly talk show called The Justice Factor on ENCA. And he was rated one of the best or top political and economic analysts from 2016 all the way through to 2017 in South Africa. Now, against this background of experience, today's topic, I think, is aptly titled, The Future of South Africa Through the Eyes of Justice. So much potential, so many challenges. I hope Justice will reveal how we as South Africans can get it right to unlock all of this potential. Our social media campaign, Think Big PSG. This series is free, it's shareable, open to anybody, both PSG clients as well as non-clients. And we look forward to hosting you today. And I'd now like to hand over to Bruce.
Dan, thank you very much indeed, Justice Malala. We began our descent. We almost crashed and burned. There was a last-minute pull-up as a herd of goats went across the runway. Are we gaining altitude or not?
Hold. It's a holding pattern, I think. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Dan, for having me on your series. I think you've had such amazing people. If I were to answer your question about the descent and where we're headed, it's a bit like, I was just thinking about you and being drilled by you this morning and thinking about this time last year, I drove all the way from Johannesburg to my little house in Cog Bay on the 26th of March, and it was the start of the lockdown. And I thought, it's 3 weeks I'll be here, and then it's, oh no, it will be 5 weeks and I'll get out of here and, life will be back to normal. And I remember your book came out exactly at that time.
This book?
That book. The first week of lockdown, it came out. And I remember thinking, wow, Bruce has a book out. I'm going to go to a bookshop. But, I can't go to a bookshop. And I didn't download it, but I kept on looking for it. But the thing is, are we taking off? Are we kind of middling and fighting turbulence? I think there's upsides and there's downsides. I think 3 years after what going down, and then Ramaphosa comes in, and politically we start saying, oh yeah, we're gonna take off. It's tougher than we think, it's longer than we think, and we're in for the long haul. I think that the uncertainty that Dan referred to right at the beginning hasn't left us yet. We keep on seeing, we keep on hearing things that make us say, yes, this is it, this is the turnaround, and the right guys have the upper hand, and then it gets pulled back and it gets pulled forward and so forth. And I think that's really, whether the analogy is about COVID-19 and rollout of vaccines, or it's about our politics in South Africa, I think we're going to remain here for a long while. And so, if there's any wisdom, and I can leave now, the wisdom I'd leave people with is what you say. Maybe it's to begin to see the upside in these downsides, because otherwise you are gloomy all the time. You're down at mouth all the time, and you're saying, oh, I don't know whether I'm going to chuck it in. And maybe chucking it in is not the thing.
Well, I mean, I've got a wealthy cousin, so there's no inheritance coming from that side of the family, unfortunately, but he took me on a low-level gyrocopter flight the other day over his farm, and we were jumping over fences, and fences are only 4.5 foot tall. He was flying really low and dodging obstacles and stuff, and I asked him to gain some altitude, and he very kindly did. But I wonder if we're doing that kind of low-flying, really low-level flying, and we're dodging obstacles as we come along. But one mistake, and you face plant, and you crash into the ground at high speed, and that gets messy.
It's very messy, and Bruce, I think it's a fantastic analogy, actually, because you think about it. Think about Tito Mboweni and the budget speech just recently, and you did a lot of reporting on that. You think about, he says, if, and the if is a big if, and if we manage to get the public sector unions to agree that they'll take a shave, they'll take a pay cut, then, our fiscus looks good, the money looks safe, and we won't be going to the IMF with a begging bowl, right? But it's a big if, and if those trade unions say, no, I don't like it, I'm gonna move on now, I'm tired of the ANC, and I want how much have we been giving them? 8%, 9%, 10% increases, far higher than inflation. Then it begins to unravel, and it's what you're saying, it's one big mistake, and then we are in trouble. So I think actually in our case, it's not just one big mistake. There's several of those fences that your cousin kept on going over that we keep on coming up against. And it's within the African National Congress itself. It's our debt situation. It's the fact that we're being watched very, very closely by the ratings agencies. Many investors are saying, we thought 2016 was pretty bad. 2017, you gave us hope. I mean, I was looking at the currency today, and you remember in January 2018, when it went to 12 to the dollar. And now,
so we beg for 12. We beg for 12. 12 would be the upside.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Give me a sense of it, because I've noticed you weakening recently. I've noticed just you beginning to write little flickers of hope. Have you had too much sugar with your breakfast? What's going on? Because you have been Papa Bear for a long time, and you have been warning of death, mayhem, implosion, and destruction. But recently, I think must be 2 pieces out of many, beginning to say maybe things are turning.
You are right. There are things that I like, and I like them very much. And the things I like are the institutional changes. And I've spoken about this before. The changes at the NPA, the fact that, just this week, as you and I are speaking, we've seen more VBS arrests.
Yeah.
We see bits and pieces. They're small, but you see them there. The NPA, went and tried to, with the Inspector General of Intelligence, tried to raid the State Security Agency, which for a long time was essentially, from what we heard from the acting DG at the Zondo Commission, billions of rand lost through corruption and so forth. And I think when you've got the right people in an institution like that, you begin to say, Bruce and I sit there and say, oh, do I wanna steal a bit of cash from my employer? Maybe I shouldn't, because actually I'll get arrested and I'll go to court and I might spend some time in jail. So that, for me, you look at what's happened with the NPA, you think about Edward Kisvetter at the SA Revenue Service. I mean, none of us likes this. None of us wants to see the taxman. But to actually have that turnaround where suddenly Tito Mboweni says, oh, I won't have to hit you with the wealth tax. I won't have to hit you with this.
I don't have to raise taxes at all. In fact, everybody gets a little tax break, and it's only tiny. But the point is that there has been a dramatic turnaround from the disaster scenarios that we've been painted in September, October last year. We are far from out of the woods. I mean, we're heading to a 5 trillion rand debt burden by 24, 25. And that's when things go well. The reality is we are in trouble. The point I want to make, though, is that very seldom do we go to the extremes that we often predict. And those extreme predictions are the things that mess with our heads.
I think it's in the nature of humanity to think about the extremes. We think about the opening up of the economy, and it's like, on my wife's birthday, COVID is going to disappear. We're all going to go out and shop. Bruce's book will fly off the shelves as it has. And it will be all hunky-dory. It's all good. And when we think it's going to be disaster, it's absolute disaster. We don't see the middle most of the time. In South Africa's case, I think we've come so close to disaster. I think that, people make fun, people deride President Ramaphosa a lot for, he's promised this, promised that. But I do think, my view is that really we did come very close to disaster, and that we turned around. That turnaround is difficult. It's exactly the point you make about taking off and sort of not carrying on with the momentum, and you're scared still. You haven't hit the ground, but you're scared. So
I'm reading this one. This is Tony Leon's book, Future Tense. I'm reading it at the moment. Look at me, a good third of the way through. And he replays the scenes that we saw happening at Nasrec, and he reminds us of that 2% margin between safety, relative safety, and absolute disaster, and how Didi Mabuza switched sides at the last minute and broke ranks with the Premier League. He reminds us of all of that and just how tenuous South Africa's politics is, and if our politics is tenuous, then the entire structure of society is tenuous. The debate and lots of questions have come through, because people have been sending questions before our chat today, and lots of people are worried about the political fabric, the balance of power within the ANC. And I know that it ebbs and it flows, but it does seem to be flowing a little bit better. I don't know if you saw the videos of Sosa's Flay a couple of months ago as the rain finally came and the water started washing through. I'm wondering if that muddy, glutinous mess that is that initial flow of water is beginning to push through the desert of hopelessness. How's that for an analogy?
I like it. Bruce, I think for me, we use the word crisis. And for me, the crisis is not just the crisis of the fiscus, the crisis of the higher education institutions, lawlessness, and so forth and so forth. I think it's also a crisis of confidence. If you look at just how confidence has plummeted, how the uncertainty has just hollowed out the confidence that you need, that we need for a a Ghanaian, a Frenchman or woman, or a Russian to say, I'm going to put some money in South Africa. They need to know that, okay, maybe their jurisdiction is fine, but the profit margin is flat, and they want to take it somewhere where they can make a bit of cash. They want to know that South Africa, for the 5 years that you talk about, that it's going to hold for the 10 years and 15 years and 20 years, actually. Because these are long-term investments. Most people don't expect to make a huge wad of cash in 5 years. They're working on a 10, 15, 20-year outlook. So I think what we need to do in South Africa, one of the crises we face, is that people are just beaten up. People are against the wall and saying, enough. And the politics is the heart of where that crisis of confidence has come from. So we need to fix the politics. And can we? Maybe we need to talk about that.
We will get there, because it's absolutely pivotal to everything, unfortunately. But when you look at the external confidence in South Africa, it's because there's no self-confidence from within. We've lost our sense of self-confidence, and it became evident every year that we've been to Davos, as gradually we've sort of slunk further and further and further and further into the corner, and we've just attracted less and less interest. There was a bit of Ramaphoria when the president went to his first Davos as deputy president, and then a couple of weeks later was confirmed as president. But within 12 months, people had lost interest once again because we didn't fulfill our promises. We didn't. We make very ambitious statements, and we go Tumamina, and then so Ramaphosa turns around and there's no one behind him. And those that are behind him are sharpening bicycle spokes to stick between his ribs. We make big promises that we don't deliver on, and we do it often.
Yeah, I think the first thing is take an organization like Business Leadership South Africa, take BUSA, take the Banking Association, all the business organizations that we have in South Africa. If, for example, we say we're going to roll out the vaccine, one, we're going to procure, two, we're going to, the logistics are going to work, we're going to bring it in, and we're going to make sure that, the old geezers like Justice and Bruce get it, and then, everyone else gets it after that. Let's see that happening, because that is how you build the confidence in the domestic market. So when you start going out to Davos or to other fora like that, you can say, I've got my guys and they're serious. So if you go and you have, a Busima Vuso or other leader of the business community kind of unsure and saying, trying to head the political players into, to corral them into one path, it's very difficult for other people to hear that message. So the key thing here is to build that confidence in our own people, our own business community. And we have to acknowledge, it's one thing to paper over the cracks and for us to sit and talk about it like, it's all good. But they've got to see it. And you're absolutely right. I see things like the institutions turning around and so forth, and I say, oh, goody. But that message has to get through to people to start believing in it. And it has to be, we have to realize that time is finite. It's not, we don't have 10 years or 15 years. Ramaphosa is in his third year as president of South Africa. If he was American, Bruce, this would be his final year in office. So the opinion writers, the assessors, the political correspondents would be saying, what is his legacy? And we are still talking about, does he have enough power to implement? And that is a huge, huge problem. And for me, the even bigger problem is that, there are things that could have been done extremely quickly. And one of them for me was, the president spoke about skills and getting the visa regulations loosened up so that Eskom can get the engineers or whoever can get the skills that they need into South Africa. That does not need the RET brigade. It doesn't need it. He just had to sign that and give it to the Minister of Home Affairs, and Dr. Motsoaledi should have done it. It shouldn't have taken 3 years.
There's a CEO of a large company waiting for his work permit. And he can't start work until that work permit is agreed on. And I mean, we make these, again, the promises, and it's frustrating. Let's move on.
And the key thing there is that everyone around that CEO who's waiting for that CEO fills in their form with the Bureau of Economic Research or with the Chamber of Commerce and Industries and says, I mean, how are we supposed to work? If I'm a CFO and I'm acting, waiting for a CEO, do I have a strategy for the year, or do I wait for the CEO? And it's a mess, and we can't have that. You can't say that's a 3-year job. That job should have been done very quickly.
But it also, again, to be fair here, we forget the unholy catastrophe that was South Africa in February 2017. We forget how broken we were. We know how broken we are, but we forget how broken we were, and just how very, very close. It was a gossamer thin scenario that Cyril Ramaphosa took over. Sure, he was part of the system. Sure, he was deputy president. But my goodness gracious me, I don't know what you believe, but I don't know if he really knew what the mess that he was getting himself into when he took over.
I think he knew, but I think the brokenness is not just the system that he inherited. It's the party that he won. And you reference Tony Leon's book, and I think it's a good point to make, that what he got into over and above, South Africa is rooting for him, go for it, his approval rating is high, he wins the 2019 election comfortably despite all the problems of the past, but the party that he has inherited, the party that he has, is an absolute total disaster. It's cleaved right down the middle. If you look at the press statements being made by anyone from Karl Niehaus to Ace Magashule, it's basically two parties that are, it's a two-headed, it's a multi-headed hydra. It's just everywhere,
And it's exhibited in just how difficult it is to get Ace Magashule to step aside. I mean, anything can happen on a daily basis, so let's not go into specifics on it, but just the fact that it's taken this long to get Ace Magashule to answer to his alleged crimes, and then to be held accountable within a political party that keeps promising that this is the party of zero corruption and it wants to clean itself up and it wants to self-rectify. It really does undermine one's faith in its ability to do so.
Absolutely, and so I think part of the discussion about the future of South Africa and the future of our economy really is how are our politics going to play out? Because if you can find a scenario that says, boom, if there is a split in the ANC, it's positive for these factors. If there's a split of some sort and it's negative for these factors, and this is what it looks like, and you can see beyond this crisis to which it's headed. I think then we're beginning to go somewhere. I think if you put yourself in Ramaphosa's boots and say, where is this thing going? He is a gradualist. If you look at the way he's gone about whether it's SARS, where really I think things are working, whether it's what he's kept at the Reserve Bank and say, let me preserve the good that is still there. If you look at the not just the NPA, but the Asset Forfeiture Unit, the Hawks, who've really come back. They are not the Scorpions, but they've come back. Then you begin to see what he's trying to do.
But had he gone in, like you or I would have liked him to go in, with 2 guns, a cowboy hat, and go in and start firing shots, he would have been taken down in a nanosecond. I have empathy for the gradualist approach. It's frustrating. We don't like it, and it's not what we need. But I wonder that had he been a little bit more brash and a little bit more courageous, whether or not it would have been counterproductive.
I think he should have. I think that he could have been a little bit more, made it clear that I don't have time. One of the things for me that are still a big if about Ramaphosa and what he can do is whether the issue of his support within the party itself is not resolved. So, every second or third or fourth week, we read about, there's a National Executive Committee meeting of the ANC, and this time, this is going to be on the table, and it will show us whether Ramaphosa has the upper hand or, whether he's weak. Now, we take an example, take the issue of the public protector and the fact that a panel made up of, people like Justice Basin Kabinde, the former TRC Chief of Investigations, what's his name now?
Very good, high-profile, strong panel. Yes, strong panel.
A very strong, independent panel, but very strong. And that panel says this person, the behavior has been absolutely, it's terrible. But the ANC in Parliament isn't sure, or Ramaphosa isn't even sure that the ANC in Parliament can say, we need to get rid of this person.
But that's the ACE proxy, right? So, but this is ACE saying to ANC MPs, Luthuli House, make sure that you are in a position to allow you to be elected. So, I mean, by all means, vote your conscience, but know which side your bread is buttered on. And that's the patronage networks. But the patronage networks, I don't want to say they're cracking, but maybe the hairline cracks are appearing. The money isn't as flowing as freely as it was. It's a lot harder to keep people beholden to you when you're not stuffing brown paper bags or suitcases full of cash in their boots from burial societies or anywhere else.
Absolutely. The ANC is a very expensive machine. That's think about just this year. Here we are in March, and on January 8th, the ANC every year holds a massive, massive shindig. It celebrates its birthday. After that, there's huge machinery within the ANC preparing for the year. Then after that, the ANC needs to go to Cape Town and prepare for the State of the Nation. There's a whole lot of hoopla and so forth. There's rallies just this year. There's a conference. There's the midterm conference. There is an election coming up. If you look at lots of the people implicated, for example, at the Zondo Commission, people who are appearing in court in the Free State alongside Ace Magashule, they say, but I gave 3 million here, someone asked me for another 2 million there, and it racks up. The ANC guzzles cash. And so part of the problem about the patronage network is that you're not just breaking the corruption, part of that money came to you as a party. So one of the key things, and you say, justice has become a little bit soft. One of the things about this year is that we're getting a political party funding act that's just come through. That means that you or I can say, I'm giving 100 Rand to the DA, 100 Rand to the EFF, 100 Rand to the ANC. We no longer have to do it in the dark and, hide it and so forth. And the taxman will know, and it will be all hunky-dory and so forth. But that means that a lot of money that was unaccounted for can no longer go, because if it's over 100,000 Rand, then you know, Bruce has to declare, justice has to declare, and the party itself has to declare. Otherwise, it's a criminal offense. So, you know, all these things will play into our politics. But the patronage network, you're absolutely right, has kept us and has kept South Africa pretty much in a very corrupt state.
But when you watch the Zondo Commission, and I mean, it's like watching the worst horror movie on earth, and it's telling you what has happened in the past. But the level of ambivalence, the level of arrogance in some of the testimonies that you see shows just how normalized the corruption was. I wonder whether the people involved in this sort of process were just so used to the bags of cash coming and going that this was just the way we are. It is the way we operate. This is not unusual. It's not illegal. It's just business.
It was. And I think, you know, I think the first thing is that many of us, many people in business, many people in civil society saw these things. And I'm eternally grateful to people like Mcebisi Jonas, who stood and spoke. I'm grateful to someone like actually Fikile Mbalula, who back in 2011, you know, went first to the ANC, to a National Executive Committee meeting and said, why was I told by the Guptas that I'm going to be the Minister of Sport and going to be transferred, perhaps wisely, from the Ministry of Police? But they spoke up, and part of the problem of that period is that many people knew and didn't speak up, and so it became a culture because, you know, Bruce is doing it, Justice is doing it, Dan is doing it, and then suddenly it's, well, you know, out of the 4 people around me, I'm the only one not doing it.
But Mcebisi Jonas told Nhlanhla Nene that, you know, you're going to be fired and there's going to be a Gupta minister. I mean, even the language that was being used. Anyway, that's history. Talk to me about the present. Talk to me about now, the efficacy of the Zondo Commission. I mean, these guys are collecting data like a macro card collects data about you when you go shopping there. It's the most astonishing data collection device. The Zondo Commission is going to have to come up with a report, and it's going to cause a huge amount of rage, anger, misinformation, disinformation. We're going to be tied up in courts for years as people use their ill-gotten gains to try and get themselves out of trouble. Is there any value in the billion rand and ticking up that has gone into Zondo so far?
You know, a lot of people will make the example, for example, they'll say, you know, here are kids at vets at UCT all across the country saying, you know, we don't have money. I want to learn, but I can't afford it. Help me out here. And they're saying, take that billion and give it to those kids. The reason why we don't have money for those kids is exactly because we didn't do things like what is happening at the Zondo Commission. We need to clear out the stables, and this is part of it. So in my view, it's money well spent. We need to continue to spend because, quite frankly, if we don't show that these things will see the light of day, then we'll never defeat them.
Then you've got Ace Magashule has got the temerity to lead students to the Constitutional Court to protest the fact that they have no money. I mean, for goodness sake, we are saddled in hypocrisy, wrapped up in, it's just diabolical. I mean, it would be funny. It would be very funny if it wasn't so serious.
The one thing I must say, though, and I want to take SASCO, the EFF Student Command, the ANC Youth League, all those young people at Vets who went and gave him a memorandum and then walked alongside him. A member of the ruling party, the party that has since 1994 determined education policy in this country, and they don't say, I'm sorry, you're the failure. you're the one who's brought us here. You cannot march with us. And they happily marched with them. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of soul searching among those young people that needs to happen. And we need to get them to think seriously about these things, because
maybe it tells us more about the state of the universities than we care to admit, that there is that lack of critical thinking that exists amongst the students.
Yeah, no, we really do need to think about it, because I think they need to have been in that moment a little bit more critical, a little bit more cynical even. I mean, you're young, you don't want to be a cynic, but a little bit more circumspect, that's the word I'm looking for, about what happened there.
Talk to me about local government elections. You've always been very plugged in to the micro trends. And I mean, all of your presentations over the last decade have been talking about those micro trends and the way in which the failures of local government have to, at some point, lead to people waking up and changing. And we've seen Koster and other places where citizens have taken over and are, switching on water almost overnight, when municipalities have failed to do the very basics of their job. What does the local government election look like?
We're going to 30 years, Bruce, 30 years of ANC dominance of our politics at national, provincial, and at local government level. The dominance is predicated on people turning out to vote. If you look at the national elections in 2019, there were 36 million people eligible to vote. Only 17.6 million actually turned out to vote. Only about 11 million voted for the ANC. So in a way, people have been, and in local elections, the numbers are far lower. There's a far lower turnout for, people turning up to vote for their local councillor. And so I think the move away from the ANC has already happened, only it didn't go elsewhere, it stayed home.
And that's the great tragedy of South Africa, is just the failure of opposition to grasp the nettle. When there was Jacob Zuma, it was easy because you could continually target the individual. Both the EFF and the Democratic Alliance are really floundering for a strategy.
They are, and I think the big question about these local elections will be, in many instances, the ANC has already virtually lost power. It's below 50%. So in most places, the ANC needs a coalition partner. It needs someone to give it that little bit extra so that it has the mayorship and it can implement whatever program. This election will be key. And in my view, the ANC will continue to lose support. And this will be key because the ANC will need to go knocking on doors and say, come in with me, so that we can make this thing work. If the coalitions didn't work in Johannesburg, in Tshwane, the initial coalitions between EFF and DA, ANC, EFF, kind of ANC and lots of the smaller parties clubbing together, this is going to be harder work of coalition building than we've seen before in the new dispensation.
And we look at the mess that's happened in Gqeberha, for example, and we look at the mess that happened in the city of Tshwane, and we look at the mess that Herman Mashaba got into with the EFF, and Tony Leon, again, in the book that we referred to earlier, just talks about the grotesque party politics there that really antagonized many of, say, the DA's core supporters. And they shifted, and a lot of those core supporters went to the right. The EFF, lots of questions around the EFF, and people want to know about the future of the EFF. They seem to be polling, certainly some political party polling suggests that the EFF is making small incremental gains, but not nearly the sort of, dare I call it, land grab that Julius Malema might have hoped for.
No, the EFF is interesting. So there are two things just about what happens. Part of what's happening inside the ANC and that march we were talking about with Ace Magashule and the students is that those students march on the ANC and say, your president, whatever they might call him, WMC and so forth and so forth. Say he's not delivering, where's the money for student fees, and as fast as being defunded and so forth. But part of it, and what Magashule is doing, is saying, oh, but I'm more radical than him. And, you know, if I were in charge, the way Jacob Zuma was in charge in December 2017, when he said, without telling anyone, I'm going to announce at the breakfast at the ANC conference that we're going to do free education for all without knowing where the money is going to come from. Ace Magashule is doing the same thing. So if there is a fissure, a split in the ANC, the question is, the RET brigade, led by Jacob Zuma, Ace Magashule, Wangani Bongo and others, does it hitch its wagon to the EFF and form a party that espouses these things? And so these local elections that are coming up towards the end of the year could push those considerations into play.
Explain the logic of the Nkandla tea parties to me. I mean, the only reprobate, I mean, not that's that's unfair. The only person who's not gone for tea with Jacob Zuma, and that's because he's suspended from Luthuli House, is Carl Niehaus. And then he went to go and see the students last week as well. And not even the students wanted him. So poor Carl sat there with his mask on looking for friends and couldn't find any. But it's been a most astonishing array of individuals who've gone and groups who have gone to go and visit Jacob Zuma at Nkandla.
Well, I think, you know, first of all, virtually each and every one of those people has some kind of legal trouble hanging over their head. You know, the EFF has the specter of VBS hanging over its head.
And that's coming. I'm assured that it's coming. I mean, yeah, the recent, there were 5 people arrested last week. I am quite reliably informed that, you know, people, they're moving up the chain. Yeah.
Exactly. So Jacob Zuma is playing the victim card that he's played for 20 years. You know, he's built his brand up around saying, you know, intelligence agencies across the world, agencies in South Africa have been looking for me. He's the only person who's been hunted down for 30 years without being, you know, who managed to become president and step down without anything happening to him. I think a lot of what's happening with that, it's publicity, it's building the victim group. And I think it's largely people who are trying to find a way around the law. Outside of that, I think that there is some sort of building of a political movement, and that movement has essentially 2 outcomes that it's working on. One is that it wins within the ANC and takes over the ANC, or if push comes to shove, and this is something they don't want, it's to move out and take a substantial chunk of a militant, not militant, but a grouping that might subscribe to some of their policy ideals.
But could you imagine that group of people all in a room at the same time? I mean, you know, it just strikes me as not a cohesive force, perhaps, and not a force that could necessarily work together.
Making a huge mistake. That grouping was in charge for 9 years. It was in charge for 9 years, and the one thing was that there were still some sane voices in the room. So you think about Des van Rooyen becoming the Minister of Finance. And Des van Rooyen on his first day is given 2 advisors. He doesn't know. He's told, these are your advisors. He says, hip, hip, hooray. And he goes ahead. These were the people who were in charge of the national treasury. And so that, you're absolutely right. And that book, Tony Leon's book, if it gets into that, it's absolutely right. Gosa Mafen is your expression.
Talk to me about King Goodwill Zwelithini. We learned last week that he had died. I mean, traditional leaders have a role in South Africa. They have power and authority in South Africa. Of all of those individuals, King Goodwill Zwelithini, I think, has been the most influential. Does his death change anything?
Not anymore. This was the 1990s, at the height of the negotiations process, where he became very close to Mangosuthu Buthelezi. The push for a federal state was built around him. The push for an independent KwaZulu was built around him. I would say yes, some turbulence around there. There is we talk about expropriation without compensation of land, very much in terms of in South Africa, it takes on a black-white race issue, and for historical reasons, that's correct. But the land legislation that is making its way through Parliament was an area of huge jeopardy for the king, because that's where the battle is between his trust, which holds that land and takes rent from very poor people, that doesn't give, particularly if you're a woman, any kind of security of tenure. You can be kicked off by the local chief, and so forth and so forth. It will continue to be an area of conflict. And what former President Kgalema Motlanthe, when he did his assessment of the land issues, essentially said, this needs to end, and we need to give that land to the people who live in it, who live and work on it.
Is this the opportunity? Because King Goodwill Zwelithini was absolutely adamant. There was no way that he was going to buckle. The Ngonyama Trust was his. It was his fiefdom. He was the feudal overlord, and liked it that way. Might it change?
I think it's an opportunity. It also depends on where, there are 2 weaknesses. The king goes, but the Inkatha Freedom Party and Mangosuthu Buthelezi are no longer the powerful, cohesive force that they used to be. So a discussion could be had with and I don't know the intricacies of how the Royal House of KwaZulu works on succession, but that this may be an opportunity to talk about these things right now.
To modernize. Justice, we need to wrap up. Everybody's got to get to work. There is an economy that is floundering and people need to go and focus. So give me one last perspective. It is election day. Let's assume it's the 27th of April, 2024. It is the latest elections in South Africa. The few people who are going to vote go and vote. What is the outcome? What does it look like?
That's such a tough question.
I know.
I can't believe you. But first of all, remember that the ANC has been beautiful in working on history, on its glorious past. The fact that from 1912 up to 1994, it steered this battle and largely got us there. There were others who played a role. There were ordinary South African sanctions, but the ANC took it as we drove this bus. 2024 will be an opportunity to say, look, we still can do this thing. we can still do this thing. But it will be 30 years. It will be, the ANC will continue to lose, even with Ramaphosa. If Ramaphosa was not its figurehead, it would probably have, in my view, gone below 50% in 2019. Even if he stays in charge, the ANC is going through so much. If you just take this week and the students and the xenophobic attacks in Durban and so forth, all the problems that have befallen this country, the ANC has to continue to lose support. So I would say in 2024, the ANC is looking desperately. It's April 27, it's the evening. The IEC as an institution, this is another thing, will still have held because it's not being fiddled with. So we'll have a free and fair election, but the ANC will be scrambling that evening, making calls, saying, you know, John Steenhuisen, if he's still around, saying Julius Malema, if he's still around, look, my bra, can we talk? There's something to be done here. So I would say two things for the next few years. We need to do something about the spiraling debt of this country because we face serious problems from internationally. We don't want to go begging to the IMF and the World Bank. And then how the ANC handles its own internal disintegration and its loss of support in the country as a whole, which will lead it to scrambling for a coalition partner in 2024. It could be a good thing. It could be a good thing.
Absolutely. I mean, but the point is that the absolute domination of the ANC is not guaranteed. It's which way it chooses to go in terms of and which friends it picks that then determine the decade after.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, at some point, the ANC needs to stop being shy. A lot of people, you know, my interest the next few months will be John Steenhuisen saying the good part of the ANC can be friends with me. And I think the actual debate is for the Ramaphosa wing to say, how bad is it really to be with the DA? And you know, this is a conversation they're going to need to have, or else they're going to need to go and rescue Mmusi Maimane and bring him back to bring that constituency around. Who knows? I
wonder. Now, fascinating. Look, I mean, there are known knowns, there are known unknowns, there are things we know we don't know, there are things we know we don't know, we'll never know, but we'll find out in the fullness of time. Justice Malala, thank you very, very much. Dan, back to you.
Thank you so much, Justice, Bruce, for another, I think, very insightful discussion. You took us through and you know, a whole web of challenges. You know, we didn't just concentrate on one particular topic this morning. You know, we just highlight once again, you know, all the challenges that you know, we as South Africans, as investors, you know, our insurance, you know, what we typically, you know, need to deal with. I quite like the analogy that Bruce used, you know, Sossus Vlei, the floods, you know, pushing through the desert into the Sossus Vlei, and you know, the result is you know, a green, verdant desert. And I almost want to, you know, compare financial advice, you know, skilled financial advisors with that river that channels that water, you know, through the desert. And in certain times like these, you know, a great advisor, a well-skilled advisor, can provide, you know, objective insights for you as an investor, or to look at your insurance portfolio, to, you know, consider all the alternatives, you know, in these challenging times. It can help you make considered, rational decisions. So if you have an advisor, a PSG advisor, I want to encourage you to, you know, continuously engage with them, you know, communicate with them. You know, they really have the skill to guide you through these challenging times. If you are not a client of PSG's, I'd like to encourage you to get in touch with us. You know, we'll guide you to the necessary advisor to provide you, with advice. We really welcome your feedback, so please communicate with us and be sure to register for our next exciting speaker in the Think Big series. Thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate it, and we'll welcome you at our next series. Goodbye.